Welcome into episode 360 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, Bruins fall to the Stars 5-2 at TD Garden. And right now, again, another episode, another start to the episode where I say, guys, it's just ugly right now.
Yeah, can we just run back our last podcast? Just save ourselves some time here.
A little lazy, don't you think?
Yeah.
It sounds like some of the
No.
Bruins right now.
The reality is that there is a lot to talk about because they're not fixing the issues they need to fix. And my opening shift is about the captains, Brad Marchand, David Pastrnak, and Charlie McAvoy, who, are saying the right things. They all met with the media after this loss on Thursday, which, as Bridget knows, that is actually kind of a rarity for all three to be available to media after the game. And I don't mean that as a knock on them or anything. I just mean that, usually there's 4 to 5 players available and it's not going to all be captains.
Yeah, especially if they just spoke recently too. They'll normally vary it and spread it out.
Right. Marchand just talked Thursday morning, but he was available again. And that they all pointed to themselves and they said it has to start with us. It's on us, the leaders, the older guys in the room, to take charge and to get us on track. And Marchand in the morning, defended Montgomery, yelling at him and shoving him on the bench. I thought that was, a good moment for him as a captain, to basically call himself out and say, I deserved that. And then after the game, again, they all, I think, struck the right tone. But at some point, they have to go out and do it. They're saying it has to start with us. And they're absolutely right. And on Thursday, it didn't start with them. They all had pretty rough games again, continuing a trend. Pastrnak takes 2 more penalties. He has 7 in the last 6 games. And I know I'm, infringing on Bridget's.
Again, this is just what he's been doing recently.
Well, but it's part of the story because these are the captains and they're part of the biggest problem, which is too many penalties. Marchand also took 2 penalties Thursday. I thought Pastrnak got off to a great start last night in the first period. He was all over the place. Scores. He has 5 shots on goal, 8 shot attempts in the first period. Very aggressive. And then he opens the second period with a penalty 11 seconds in, and his game just completely fell off. And, it's these guys have to lead the way with 60-minute efforts. It can't be a good period here or there. It can't be a great game once out of every 5. And right now, it's not clicking for anyone, but it does start with them, and they seem to know that. Now they have to figure out how to actually go out and do it.
Yeah, and so obviously ours are tied very closely together because mine is something I wrote about. I think it's up online now by the time people are watching this. The continued penalty issues. Basically, I spent last night after the game just kind of grabbing the most important stats about the penalties and quotes from the guys from last night about what's been going wrong and how to fix it. And I mean, somebody who, it shouldn't be surprising, Nikita Zadorov has the most penalties for the Bruins and tied for the most in the country, but he actually didn't have one last night. So
you can hear Bridget's college hockey creeping in. Most in the country.
Okay, you're right. That is how I speak for college hockey. Yes, but that's what I say. Most in the league. All right, because you can't say most in the league if you don't mean just Hockey East or something. But anyway, Zadorov didn't have one against Dallas. This was his first game of the season that he didn't have one. So I mean, good on him. He didn't do anything last night. But then you get to just below him down the list, and it's McAvoy and Pastrnak, and they both have 14 penalty minutes this season. And Pastrnak said he doesn't think he's ever taken this many penalties this close together at all in his career. And then Marchand right behind them with 12 penalty minutes. And I feel like Marchand's might be the most frustrating because a lot of them are those old Marchand retaliatory penalties, like the cross check he had on Labushkin yesterday. It was somebody else hit him. He popped up and just cross checked the first guy he saw. And it's like right in front of a ref. And you know that it's completely unnecessary. And it's your captain. And you're like, okay, this would have made sense for Brad Marchand when he first got into the league and was the little ball of hate. But now he's the captain and he's got to do better than that. And then Pasternak with a lot of stick infractions again. And that's been what's been killing the team because they're getting a little bit behind plays. They're putting their stick in between somebody's skates or hooking them on the arm or, slashing them from the side just to try to slow them down. But really, they just need to move their feet a little faster and not get caught out of position. And some of these penalties wouldn't need to happen. So it's the penalties are just a product of them doing other things wrong. And some of that's attitude and not taking dumb penalties. And some of that's maybe conditioning or just not being on your assignment the right way, not being in the right position to defend, or turning the puck over and having to get back really quickly and try to defend from a position that you're behind. So the penalties are really glaring, but they're proof of other issues that are going on that cause them.
My initial thought after the game last night was about Jim Montgomery and what his leash is going forward if struggles continue for, say, another couple of weeks at this rate. And I don't want to exonerate the players or the general manager because the general manager constructs the team. The players go out and play. The coach is in that awkward middle ground where he has to do the best with what he has. And also there's times where coaches say and do the right things, to implement the right game plan, the right strategies, but there just becomes a disconnect. And I'm not saying that that's where this is yet, but I think it's a storyline to watch after this game going forward. You have a game Saturday night in Boston against Toronto. Toronto's having their own struggles. Craig Berube is going ballistic on his top line on the bench in Toronto. You historically have their number. Both teams are going to want to right the ship a little bit. And if Toronto comes into Boston and the Bruins have another game where they're just completely undisciplined and they don't, they're getting heavily outshot heading into the third period like they were last night. It's just it's the unfortunate reality of coaches are oftentimes the scapegoats. And what happens is, and I mentioned this online after the game last night, and the commentary back to me is it varies. Some people say he's got to go. Some people say it's on the GM, it's on the players. There's all sorts of opinions, and they're all valid. And I guess the reason I said what I said last night wasn't so much what Brian wants. It's what I see happen in the NHL every single year in the beginning of the season, which is there's always a really good team on paper that gets off to a slow start. And what happens is the president of hockey operations feels heat from the ownership. The GM feels heat from the president. And then what's the GM to do to save their own image or, cast blame aside? You can't fire 23 players, so the coach is the scapegoat. And I don't think that that's the case right this very second. But to Bridget's point a few minutes ago, when you hear the coaches and players all saying the same things and the results are just the same undisciplined play, getting outplayed. Okay, well, you're all saying the same thing. So what's going on here? And eventually something is going to give. And I can tell you guys right now, GMs and owners and presidents of hockey operations, they don't like to play those odds of we'll be that team that's going to paper to turn it around like the Blues in 19 or the Oilers last year. They try to flex their muscle and implement their jurisdiction when they can early on and say, okay, as the GM right now, I'm not coaching the team, but I can do something to try to change course here and save this season before it goes real south. And it's hilarious because right now the Bruins are 3-4-1 and it's October. So I guess I'm saying it's something to keep an eye on going forward. Call it the next couple of weeks here.
Yeah, it's fair. My first response and reaction to this idea of Montgomery being on the hot seat, which he may very well be, or maybe soon, is if Don Sweeney's first move is to fire the coach instead of exhausting all his roster and personnel options, then shame on Don Sweeney. Like it at some point, yeah, this might get to a point where firing Montgomery is the move. But if you do that before you, again, not that I'm saying like any of these guys are going to be the savior, but sign Tyler Johnson and see if he helps. Call up Fabian Lysell. Waive some of these guys who just honestly are not earning their keep on this team right now. And I'm talking about your Tufties, Max Jones, even Brazo, honestly. Like you have guys who, in my opinion, like don't deserve to stay here and keep getting shots. And you have other guys hanging around or in Providence who could help, I'm not saying they definitely will, that haven't gotten shots yet. So if I'm done Sweeney, like that should be the first move. It's like, let's try some different people on the ice. And then if that still doesn't work, then I'll look behind the bench. I don't know why there's a hesitation to make any roster moves or waive guys who are not going to get claimed. Like, I don't know what the concern there is. Connor Sheary just cleared waivers, and like I know he has a little bit bigger contract, so it's not apples to apples, but but like, yeah, like I mean, Connor Sheary has produced in this league, and
Connor Sheary
no
has
one wants
played on lines and in the league with Alex Ovechkin and Sidney Crosby, and won Stanley Cups with Sidney Crosby. So, plug UMass plug.
Yeah. So, but yeah, as it relates to Montgomery specifically, though, like it definitely feels like he's kind of short on answers right now. Like last night after the game, he talks about their attitude being off, and he kind of gives a long answer about that, and then ask him a follow up about like, well, what's the next step to try to fix this? And his answer to that was very short. He just said one by one, just one step in front of the other. Like it wasn't a detailed plan. It, wasn't, well, I'm gonna try this, or even like ripping guys or anything. And I get it, like he doesn't have to share his plans with us. But it was kind of telling that it's like it feels like he can diagnose the problem in detail, but keeps trying different things that aren't working. I mean, last night during a TV timeout, he basically holds an impromptu team meeting on the bench, and he's very animated throughout the entire commercial break. And he's drawing stuff up on the whiteboard, and then they give up a goal a minute later, and it's like, everything is just so off.
Yeah, it is off, and you're right, Scott. I absolutely agree with you that the first thing should be trying to optimize what your internal options are, player personnel wise. It shouldn't be to fire the coach, because that's just not the GM doing his complete job. Prior to firing a coach should be last resort, in the sense of the GM has done everything he can, and the coach is doing everything he can, and it's just for a prolonged period just not working, and you have to change something up. And we can sit here and talk about why that's also heavily on the players. They're the ones playing the game. But, at the same time, Don Sweeney firing three coaches in his tenure is probably not something he wants on his resume either, because it just keeps, I feel like prolonging what will be the inevitable of people looking at him. And, you're looking at Brad Marchand and David Pastrnak. They were coached by Claude Julien. Charlie McAvoy wasn't. Brandon Carlo, I think, was for a little bit. So Carlo, Marchand, Pastrnak, this would be the third coach getting fired under their, tenure in Boston. Not that I'm saying it's on them. I'm just saying it's a correlation. So yeah, I don't think Montgomery should get fired right this second. But again, when you mentioned, Scott, that he just they just don't have really any answers, that's when you start to get nervous and say, okay, well then where's the confidence that things will turn around? Is it just trusting that it's early and they'll figure it out? That's a bit of a naive place for everybody to sit.
Well, and so obviously after the game, Scott mentioned the captains come out. They talk about uh, what maybe the reasons were for looking like having this kind of start after the starts that they've had the last 2 seasons. McAvoy talked about it and Marchand talked about it both. How the last 2 years they came out through the gates and they were ready to go, but this year they're not. And Marchand brought it back to, he wasn't trying to make an excuse. This is just a quote from when he was talking to the media about what maybe caused it, and he said that it was important time that was missed by guys in camp that normally they would have, because of injuries, they're held out, or they missed time and they weren't able to get acclimated, and also the extreme turnover over the last 2 seasons, and still trying to get guys to work correctly together is something that he noticed is really affecting the start to the season. So I think a lot of guys there are attributing it to maybe attitude, like Montgomery said, it was the attitude of being too reactionary and being too frustrated. But there's also this element of, okay, we're getting frustrated because things just aren't clicking early on with some new line mates or things like that, or that you didn't have a chance to work on in camp, and it kind of snowballs.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'd say is like every season's different and every team has to come together differently, and like that's fair. The pointing to turnover and guys missing time, it's like there's a ton of turnover last year and they started strong. The year before, they started the season with Marchand and McAvoy on the shelf. They were out injured, recovering from offseason surgeries, and that team started great. So,
and Krejci's coming back to the NHL from a year in Europe.
Yeah, so it's not like they've just had these like ideal smooth starts where everyone was healthy and had chemistry right off the bat. Like they've had challenges every year that they've managed to overcome. This year, so far, they're not overcoming them. So and it's also like I feel like if you got like actual honest answers from them, they would just say like, I don't know, like we're working through it. We're just going one day at a time and we're trying to figure it out. Like they're saying things, I think, in part because they have to say something. And there's been a couple of times recently where it's like I wonder if they really believe what they're saying. And I thought it last night when McAvoy said that they've been all around it the last couple of games and he feels like they're close and it's just one or two plays. And I was like it's a comforting thing to say, but like I wonder if he really believes it. Like I don't know about you guys, but like I don't feel like I don't think they've been that close. Like I don't think this is a matter of like, man, if we just got one or two breaks. Like I watch them and it still feels like they're just really off to me. Like I think it's oversimplifying to be like, yeah, well, if we just had one scoring chance go in instead of missing the net or whatever. I feel like it's more than that.
Well, I feel like I could see why he might think that, because he's on the top power play unit, and that unit at times has been, really close to scoring, and not putting it in. When he's on the ice, that might be the case. Like I know they've had struggles with regardless of who's on the ice, but in his time out there, because he's out there a lot with the top line and top players, like maybe that is really just what he sees.
Yeah, I mean his post game commentary about we've been so good the last couple Octobers, and essentially what did that do for us? So it's just that to me, it's like that's a very black and white response to the media afterwards to try to find some sort of silver lining. It's like, okay, so because you guys got to great starts last couple of years and you found a way to lose in the playoffs, so I know he's not saying we wanted to get off to a bad start, but when your assistant captain is saying, yeah, our attitude in here is that we got off to good starts the last few years, and what did that do for us? So we're not going to panic here because it's early. The latter I get, yeah, you don't want to panic because that's not going to help anybody, but I don't know, it just seems like that's kind of a disingenuous answer there.
Yeah, and I think, I think we would all agree that facing adversity throughout the season is a good thing. Like, that is when you build character and grow and learn things about yourself. And, like, go back to 2 years ago when the Bruins set the points record. I don't think they lost to the Panthers because they didn't face adversity during the season, but I think it's a factor. I think it's worth considering. Like, maybe it would have been better if that team had hit, like a real hiccup somewhere along the way. But that said, like, adversity is only good if you do learn from it and fix it and grow. And we're still early enough in the season that they can do all that. So, like, that's where, yeah, not panicking is the right approach. But it's always one of those things where it's like, in the moment, though, sometimes it's hard to like see that light at the end of the tunnel, because again, they're saying all the right things and they obviously want to fix it and play better. And yet this is now 3 games in a row that they've played, really poorly, and they've been undisciplined all year, and they've struggled to create offense 5-on-5 all year. So those are kind of like, again, like the discipline, the stick fouls, the just working harder and skating more and playing through guys, that can be fixed. Like, it should be fixed. But the not being able to create offense 5-on-5, I'm like, what's like the easy fix there? Like, I don't think is an easy fix. That I think is going to require real legitimate hard work, because they don't have the talent to just be a high scoring team where, okay, well, if they just get all these talented guys going, they're going to be fine. Like, they're going to have to, their offensive identity is going to have to be a team that grinds it out. And that is going to require hard work that they really have not been doing.
Yeah, and just to like remind people, they didn't have any 5-on-5 goals against Dallas. Pasternak was out there with Patra on a 4-on-4. And then Brazeau scored on the power play, right? So, like, those were different combinations. Those were guys that, like, Patra and Pasta don't spend a lot of time on the ice together.
Maybe they should.
Maybe they should.
Question mark?
Maybe they should. Maybe that can, be a little segue into what they should do, what they should or could try, because they did try different combinations again against Dallas. They slightly different, right? They kept Marchand with Pasternak and Elias Lindholm, but they put together slightly different middle six, and they kind of went away from it during the game. They kind of threw that fourth line back together at one point because they had separated them. They threw them back together. But anyway, guys, did you think, or what do you think is missing, like, in the combination, something that hasn't been tried yet, that, or you've seen a little bit of that, you're like, why isn't there more of that?
I mean, I think maybe what you saw last night, which is the top line of Marchand, Pasternak, and Lindholm, and then also what you guys just kind of alluded to with Patra and Pasternak. Besides that, and then maybe the other combination was the Frederick Coyle Marchand combination, which would insinuate that you'd have a Zacha, Pasternak, Lindholm top line, which we have seen a lot of. But that Marchand Coyle Frederick combination, we saw one game of it, thought it looked pretty good. Haven't seen it really since. And then, but then again, Marchand's on the line last night that I also think you could see more of, which is the Lindholm, Pasternak, Marchand line. So, but I guess that would be my answer quickly. But I feel like I have kind of Scott energy right now, where it's like I'm just so fed up of seeing all these combinations, and it's like,
yeah,
just stick with something.
Well, yeah, like, I don't even know if you have to stick with something. I just feel like it's not a matter of combinations. Like, it's guys just digging down and playing better no matter who they're with. And if there are any changes I want to see, it's changes involving guys not currently on the roster. Like, I'll go back to, I would like to see more bodies mixed in instead of, because, okay, like, so they had another bad game Thursday. Montgomery's probably going to change something for Saturday against Toronto. It's like, all right, what's that change going to be? Riley Tufte and or Max Jones comes back in? What are we expecting to happen there? We've already done that like 5 times. Like, like how many times can you just keep doing the same changes and hope it clicks? By the way, we're recording this right before Friday's practice. So if they may make changes for that practice, and so I don't want to go too into it because by the time people listen, maybe they have called someone up or waived someone.
So let me, because any personnel changes where they would call somebody up, you're probably talking about a bottom 6 forward, right? So I want to kind of keep it to right now the players that we expect scoring from, albeit maybe different levels, and why it hasn't been there. And so somebody reached out to me last night after the game and said, who can we count on this team besides Pastrnak to score consistently? And my response was, because it's a loaded question, I mean, I guess somebody could say the simple answer is nobody. But there are players with potential, and there are players that have done it before, but not multiple times. Obviously, Brad Marchand used to be an answer to that. But my answer to this individual was, at a point per game pace, nobody, right? So that's obviously with David Pastrnak. He's a point per game player and then some in this league. Nobody else in this roster is. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be relying on others to produce at like that tier below. And so Brad Marchand, for example, okay? Brad Marchand, Charlie Coyle, Pavel Zacha. You relied on them heavily last year for offensive production behind David Pastrnak. Now, there was a big gap between Pastrnak and them, but they still performed. Brad Marchand, in his last 43 games, dating back to, I believe, February 29th of last year. So it was all of March, all the playoffs, and so far this year. I think he has 6 goals in his last 43 games. That's not great, especially for somebody who's his age and coming off of his surgeries. So I guess my point is he had, I think, 67 points last year. But my point is going forward, it's like, okay, there are questions about can he produce, because he kind of tailed off towards the end of last year. Pavel Zacha and Charlie Coyle, they combined for 119 points last year between the two of them. Okay. This year, they have 3 points combined in 16 combined games played. Trent Frederick, Morgan Geekie, they combined for 79 points, I believe, last year. Right now, they have 3 total points in their 15 combined games played this year, 2 of which came last night against Dallas. All I'm trying to say is, to the individual who mentioned to me, who can you rely on scoring behind Pastrnak? The Bruins have players that have shown it in Boston, and they are vastly underperforming for their own individual standards. Elias Lindholm is another player that we can obviously probably rely on. Going into the season, we expected at least 60 points, call it. And he's been okay, but he doesn't seem to be like a dynamic playmaker. He just seems to be a solid player. So the question's valid, because until these players pick it up, but these are the players that you should be relying on for scoring to this point, even through 8 games, and they haven't been providing it.
Yeah, I mean, if you just like, if we want to do like benchmarks, and you kind of touched on some of them there, like, all right, Elias Lindholm, Brad Marchand, Charlie Coyle, Pavel Zacha, I would say all need to be 60-point guys or very close to it. Currently, none of them are on pace for 60 points. Geekie and Frederick, you mentioned, those need to be 40-plus point guys, right? That they're both right there last year. They should be able to produce more, or at the very least the same. And they are not even close to being on pace for that. They're not on pace for 30 points right now. So, yeah, like, I mean, that's 6 forwards in your top 9 who are just like way off pace right now. So, yeah, like we can talk about everyone else around the the edges of this roster and different changes or whatever. But it's like right there, like there's your important forwards who are all underperforming so far.
Yeah, and I'm there's been times over the last 2 seasons where it's like, okay, this person goes quiet, but this other line is kind of picking up for lack of production. But we're at a point where the first 8 games of the season, it's kind of been systemic throughout, all the lines besides the fourth line, though they came back down to earth the last 2 games. They haven't been able to be I don't think anyone expected them to just roll and roll and roll and be the solution and carry, the Bruins. Uh, so yeah, like right now it's much more spread throughout the team that there's that the scoring just has dried up. Um, or maybe, wasn't really there to begin with because I know they had that high scoring game against Montreal, but we were there for that game, and Montreal was not playing good defensively, really at all. And yeah, like the other games you think back to, Colorado, they did a good job dealing with some of the pushback that the Avs were giving them because there was a point in time where it was like, okay, well, they might be they might be actually coming back, but once again, they probably could have made that much more of an easy win. Nashville was a desperate team, but they still didn't make that a close game. Uh, and then Dallas they were off to a good start. They really they I didn't have an issue with their start. The energy was there, and then all of a sudden, once the frustration starts, it just kind of sticks around. It just lingers and affects the whole like atmosphere of what they're trying to do.
Yeah, I just feel like last night, yeah, they got off to a good start, but the first period ended pretty even. And, I definitely think that the tide turned after that first Dallas goal, which we can get into because I didn't like that goal at all. But that should have been a game where when the Bruins went to Nashville, okay, we were saying before the Nashville game, the Bruins didn't play well against Utah. You had the Martian Montgomery incident. The Bruins and Predators should both be playing desperate, and let's see who comes out on top. Well, Nashville came out with their hair on fire and blitzed Boston start to finish. There are games throughout the season where you kind of know going into a game, one team's desperate and they're going to skate downhill no matter who is their opponent, whether it's a last place team or a first place team, nothing's getting in their way. And despite Dallas being one of the top teams in the West, as we all project that they will be this year, and they have historically been for recent seasons, that should have been a game where they came into Boston and Boston just skated downhill and blitzed them. And it doesn't matter if a team has more foot speed on a given night. No. There are certain nights where will is all that is at play here. And it's great that Boston came out decent, but it's a 60-minute game. And you could tell, and I'm sure you guys could tell from up above, but the way the Bruins skated in the final, call it 12 minutes of that game, I would say from with 15 minutes left in the third to about 5 minutes left in the third before the empty nets kind of got away from the Bruins. That 10-minute stretch, you're sitting there and you're watching it, and you're watching how the Bruins possess the puck down low. They're attacking the net, and you can't help it but ask yourself, oh, that's right, you guys do know how to skate. Where was this the rest of the game? I mean, Charlie McAvoy is one of my favorite players, has been since he entered the league. Even before he entered the league, I couldn't wait for him to become a Bruin, watching him at BU and with the U.S. development program. But he is one of those players, and he probably hates that this is a trait about him, but when he turns it on, it's so obvious. And there's moments where he just takes the puck and just goes end to end, but it's like, okay, then where's that assertiveness? Not that you want to go end to end all the time as a defenseman, but my point is the light goes on when they want it to, and it's just too selective when it happens. It's too few and far between.
Yeah, I was just looking at back at their start to the game because I think it's worth getting into. When the Bruins opened the scoring, 11:57 in, so just call it 12 minutes. Shots on goal at that point were 11-4 Bruins, and they now had a 1-0 lead. And then for whatever reason, Stars just came storming back, and the Bruins had no answer. Shots the rest of the period from there were 9-0 Dallas. And like they tie the game, the Bruins just have no answer, and then the penalty trouble starts in the second. So, like, to what Bridget was saying, it's like as soon as they hit adversity, it's like they just kind of folded, and it took way too long for them to make any sort of push back. And it's like, all right, cool, you got off to a good start. Like, that addresses one problem they've had at times this year, which was slow starts. But if you're gonna kind of crumble as soon as the other team responds, then what good does it do you? Like, it's not a 12-minute game, it's a 60-minute game, and it seemed like they only had enough energy to take control for 12 minutes.
And guys, I feel like they've been having difficulty stringing together 60-minute efforts dating back well into last season. I mean, it's been so long, but I just, that's just how I feel about it. I remember last year, like the last quarter, they were kind of like the Bruins last year won. I think they had like the record for most like overtime points. Like, so the Bruins had their struggles last year. They were kind of, but when they went to the playoffs, like, credit to them, they beat Toronto. But that Toronto series, like we talked about it in the moment, like they felt like they were lucky to have won that series. They brought it a lot against Florida, to their credit. There was some misfortunes with calls and Florida just being the better team. But it's been a while where like I feel like I've watched the Bruins have been like, oh yeah, they've been stringing together just complete games for like a month, like or a lot of the season. It's kind of been an issue. Is it a lack of talent? Can they not? Are they not capable of, no matter how bad they want to? Is it coaching or a combination of everything? But isn't that the way you guys feel? Like, it's been a while since we've watched consecutive Bruins games or just complete game efforts we used to see back in the Chara Bergeron heydays.
Yeah, I mean, it has, and I get, like, I think if you look around the league, you're not seeing a lot of those games early in the season. Like, everyone, maybe not everyone, most teams are trying to find their stride and figure out how to put those complete efforts together. And a lot of times it doesn't come right out of the gate, which again is a new experience that we have to remind ourselves of here, because as we said, like, we've been used to these last 2 years where they get off to the best start in the league and they're 10-1, and by November 1st you're like, oh, they're locked into a playoff spot, and now it's just playing out the rest of the season, figuring out where they're going to finish in the standings, whatever. So this is different, but yeah, what concerns me is, like, it's not even that, like, they're not having 60-minute efforts. Like, I don't even think they're having 40-minute efforts or 30-minute efforts. Like, it's not even 2 good periods or half of a good game. It's like literally like 1 period or less. And like, you got to at least get, like, can we get 2 periods first? Because you might win more games that way. And then build to 60, because they're not, I don't think they're even giving you that right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's exactly it, Scott. It's
And
not even close to 60.
yeah, and I think something that, like, we've gone the first 40 minutes without talking about, and we still kind of don't tie this in as maybe as much as we should, is, goaltending is obviously a part of every win and every goal against, and it's been a lot of the times, I think, it hasn't been like, okay, wow, that's a really terrible performance by, the losing goalie, whether that be Korpisalo or Swayman. But do you guys feel that maybe goaltending isn't where it has been the last 2 seasons either, and that's part of why the winning percentage is now, below 500?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Their goaltending has not been good enough, and I don't want to completely ignore Korpisalo, but for this discussion, I'm going to leave him out of it for now, because Swayman's been playing recently. He's gotten the last 3 games, this whole losing streak. So I want to focus on Swayman, who, okay, we knew he might not necessarily hit the ground running because he missed all of camp and preseason, and that does matter. But you're into the season now, and you need him to be an elite goalie. And Bridget, you're right. Like, it's not a ton of soft goals against or anything, and I don't think any of these losses are on, quote unquote, on Jeremy Swayman. There's so many other issues in front of him, but when you hold out to be paid like an elite goalie, which is what he's now being paid as, these are the moments where your team is going to need you when they're going through a tough stretch during a season and struggling to score and taking some penalties and not playing the best hockey. Elite goalies have to step up and steal their teams some points. And Swayman's not doing that right now. And you're getting far enough into the season where I don't think you can just say, oh, well, give him another month. Like, the Bruins need him now. If you look at like Money Puck's goals saved above expected, there's 61 goalies in the NHL who have played at least 2 games so far. Jeremy Swayman ranks 21st in goals saved above expected. So, all right, just on the fringe of the top third of the league. But the expectation is not for Jeremy Swayman to be the 21st best goalie in the NHL. The expectation for him is to be a top 5 goalie. You needed a save from him on one of those power plays. Dallas scores on 3 power plays. You need a save on one of them. I think, definitely need a save on the first goal, on Dallas's first goal of the game, which was 5-on-5, where, yeah, there were breakdowns. I didn't like Johnny Beecher's lack of a back check, but you still ended up with a shot from a guy kind of drifting to the left in Matt Duchene that Swayman didn't get square to and gave him a lot of net to shoot at. You need to stop there. And, right now you're not getting it.
Yeah, it's absolutely all valid, Scott. And the Nashville game, I believe it was the eventual game-winning goal. But yeah, it was kind of it was right. I forget which goal it was, but it was right when the McAvoy double minor expired, and it was net mount, and it kind of just like squeaked through him. Now, shit happens, but you just kind of you're like, wish that one didn't go in. But the Bruins got outplayed the entire game against Nashville. Last night against Dallas, your team has been struggling. They get off to a good start, as we've documented here. They get off to the 1-0 lead. That first goal kills me. Kills me. It absolutely kills me. And I'm sure now the Bruins bench needs to be strong enough mentally to withstand somebody tying a game 1-1 in the first period. Oh God, what are you gonna do? Right. But still, like, clearly the team's fragile right now. And that's just not a goal where it's not like, it's not like Rupe Hintz was sprung on a breakaway and, had a nice breakaway move to tie it 1-1. No, to your point, Scott, it was Matt Duchene drifting away from the left circle. Swayman just, out of position, and 1-1, and Dallas kind of takes over. And that one is where it's like you need your goalie to step in where you've been the better team throughout the game so far. And that's when you need him to just make what appeared to be a routine save. And then, yeah, the second period starts. Okay, 1-1. Who wants the game? And you get Pasternak with the stick infraction again. So, like, it's frustrating, but you can't help but wonder, how does that game play out if that Duchene goal just gets blocker to the corner like it should have been, or gloved?
Yeah, if you watch the replay of that, he does look like he hesitates a little bit before he starts to slide over, and that split second hesitation was why he wasn't able to get to the post or block that out of the net. And it wasn't like Duchene did anything crazy. It was just a regular shot. It's like, it's not like he moved direction so quickly that you couldn't track him over there. You definitely could have. Scott, what are you laughing at? Are you gonna? Oh, you're muted, bro.
I saw a tweet from the AP style book, which is what like all journalists use AP style. This is not completely like on-hockey related, but it says a team losing a game is not a quote disaster. Home runs are homers, not dingers, jacks, or bombs.
What the heck?
It's just AP style book is just getting on its high horse on a Friday morning. That's what I was
And
laughing
with
at.
with all slang too. Like
Yeah, no slang, no fun.
no fun.
So guys, I want to pose a question to the audience, and feel free to comment below on YouTube or Twitter or email us. But like, it's tough because all these episodes, for the most part, they've been following disappointing games, and it's right out of the gate, and it appears as though we've kind of seen their floor before anything else. Like, sometimes you see a team start off hot or start off okay, and like, you know what they're capable of. And when they're struggling, you're like, okay, well, they have to get back to that. But right now, we haven't seen the Bruins play anything really but, sluggish and undisciplined. So it's gonna sound like it's like the sky's falling. And look, they're 8 games in. I still have the Bruins as a playoff team, and I know I started the podcast with the prompt about Jim Montgomery. That's just me saying it's a storyline to follow. I don't know how you could follow this team and not acknowledge that existence. But for the fans who might just say, "Oh, you guys, it's early. Like, stop being woe is me or panicking." I would like, what would you guys say is like the problem? Like, or why do you feel like it's just okay to say, "Oh, it's early, don't worry about it"? Like, what have you seen from these players besides maybe some of their best players that gives you the confidence that they can right the ship here? And just, in general, what has the audience seen that you'd like to see them do better? I know that's the answer to that question is probably everything, but something that they've done well in the past that they aren't doing right now.
Do you want us to answer that too?
Of course. But I
Okay.
just think, like, I think Bridget, Scott, and Brian, like, we talk on the podcast, but everybody listening, like, everybody has good viewpoints and opinions
Yeah.
on what we're seeing. So it's just good to get everybody's
I mean, I
interaction.
think that the reason why you can somewhat chalk it up to and not necessarily panic too much about it is chalk it up to it being early, which is, it's very obvious to me that this is not the like this isn't the average of what these guys have looked like throughout their career, right? Like, and some of it is simple fixes, like stop cross-checking people, like when you're away from the play, and there's certain stuff that isn't so difficult to analyze and break down, taking fewer penalties and not putting your stick into people's arms and feet. Like, those things are not that difficult to change. And the past tells us that they're not going to look this bad if they're anything like, unless they completely changed over the course of the off season. They're not this bad of a team. And that's because they also do have a good culture that usually keeps them on track, and they don't normally get super down. And maybe they've just needed to go through some of these issues and address them one by one, like Coach said. But the reason I am not thinking, oh, this is just how the rest of the season's going to go, is because I don't think we've seen a majority of these guys play consistently at the level they've been playing over the last few games.
There are some things that I'm okay with not getting too worked up over, and some things that are much more concerning to me. Like, so yeah, the penalties, as I said, like they should be able to clean that up. Maybe not entirely. Like, they might go through the year being one of the highest penalized teams, but they should be able to clean it up more than what it is right now.
Well, they're certainly off to a lead in that category. They are running away with it, man.
Yeah. That all the guys we've named who can and should produce more and have a track record of producing more, I think most of them will start producing more at some point. What concerns me, though, and what is like a really bad sign is that they were not a very good possession team last year. They got outchanced, expected goals numbers, all that were not very good last year, but they outperformed it all because they had pretty good finishing and they had the best goaltending duo in the NHL. Now, this year, so far, they made moves this offseason that they thought were going to make them a better possession team, and they've been worse. And they've been one of the worst possession teams in the entire NHL. And now they don't have two elite goalies. Now, you hope they have one, although, as I said, he's not been elite so far. So, like, that worries me because I'm like, well, the core of last year's team was already not a very good possession team. It was already a team that got outchanced in too many games and pinned in the D zone in too many games. And I am starting to, like, as I see them continue to struggle to get offensive zone time, it generate offensive chances 5-on-5. Like, at some point, we have to start wondering, like, maybe the moves they made didn't fix that. Like, maybe this team just isn't good enough to possess the puck and cycle in the offensive zone shift after shift the way that most elite NHL teams do.
Yeah, I think things could get ugly optically if they lose to Toronto in pretty going away fashion on Saturday. I just think that the narrative is already. I mean, you guys know in the scrums, like the hard questions they're starting to get asked. They're gonna get asked even more, and when you have a coaching staff and players that are just kind of palms up, well, that's when management has to kind of be like, all right, do we step in here? So again, this is not me hoping anybody loses their job or anything like that. Like, if the team's just not good enough, which I have a hard time believing, because on paper they're better in my opinion than they were last year. Now, Scott, you just mentioned last year. I think they may have been playing above maybe some of their analytics tell them, at least results wise. But I have a hard time believing that this roster on paper is anything but a playoff team. But if it ends up being that this team's just not good enough, the players just aren't good enough, that's not really the coach's fault necessarily. But nonetheless, like, there's a pecking order. Like, it's a dirty business, and you see it happen every year. It seems that a coach gets fired in the first month and a half of the season, like I said off the top. And I'm not saying it's going to be Jim Montgomery, and I hope it's not. But what else are we supposed to talk about if the Bruins just keep having stinker after stinker after stinker in moments where they're supposed to be, at the very least, showing 100% effort? And so it's tough. These are shitty conversations to have because I think Montgomery has been, I love Bruce Cassidy. I didn't like when Bruce Cassidy got fired because he had the winningest, the highest win percentage as a coach in the league since he took over his time in Boston. But they bring in Jim Montgomery, and I've loved Monty since too. He has eyebrow raising lineup decisions here and there and line shuffling that I've never been in sync with, but by and large, I like Montgomery. So I never like having these talks, but it's just what else are we supposed to talk about until the team rights the ship?
Scott, I know you gotta go soon, but wait, Brian, I have something for you.
Oof. Talk to me. What do we have here?
The Four Nations
okay.
jerseys.
Yes. Yeah, I'll give a quick opinion on that. I would say international jerseys have so much potential, and I just feel as though the last couple of decades or so, at least outside the junior level, they are seldom, those expectations are seldom met. So I think they're okay. Like, they're okay. They all left me wishing for a little bit more. Sweden, Finland, US, Canada.
Yeah, I like Canada's. US, like, we've had this conversation before where it's like, I think they have to keep trying different things so they can sell them, because I guess the theory would be if you just settle on one jersey that you have all the time, people would buy one and then never buy again. but like I think for a while they were the alternates that the junior team would wear at World Juniors, and now I think they're just the regular ones. But the diagonal USA down, based off like the 1980s style, is
Mhm.
just so great and so classic. And it's like I just wish that was full-time USA hockey jersey at every level for every tournament. And I know it's not going to happen because they've too much invested in designing something different every tournament. But yeah, I don't like it's like their jerseys for this tournament. I'm like, I don't hate them, but they're just kind of blah. Like I feel like I've seen a USA jersey like this, like in 8 different variations, and
Yeah.
they're all just kind of blah.
And sometimes with these international commissions, like there's like jersey like mandates or guidelines to follow that kind of make them more bland. But this is obviously a non what Olympic committee or whatever it is, like
Yeah.
international tournament. So like they could have what I'm saying is like I feel like the freedom for jersey designs could have been fair game for anything, right? They could have gotten really fun with them. But guys, I've always been interested in like USA, whether it's USA hockey or just USA sports in general, like having like a navy blue base, because I mean the flag is like appears to be a lighter blue, which is like the 1980 like US color. So I wish that blue was used more than like navy blue, because that's not really what the flag is. But in any event, I agree, Scott. I think that Canada logo is probably the best of the bunch that I saw.
Yeah, of
But
like if I was gonna buy it, like if I was a fan of like just from any of those countries, like the one that looks like it's worth buying is the Canadian one. Like that one, I feel like if I was wearing that, I'd be like, yeah, this looks nice. Like I'd want to wear this. But the other ones, they're kind of just like too, I don't know, like bland.
Bland.
Yeah, they're I mean, I know it's supposed to be simple, like some countries like to keep their designs like very much about like just this is like the flag, like this is this like very simply like you see it, you know it means Sweden. You like we respect that, but it leaves a lot to be desired. Like you want to be able to have a jersey where you know from that like from looking at it exactly what that tournament was like and exactly like oh who that like before you even see whose name's on the back like be like oh that was like the one that McAvoy wore or like that was the one that Crosby wore in this tournament or whatever and just have some of that recognition. Whereas you see the jerseys that they have now for like Sweden, it's like anybody could have worn that jersey over the last however many years. It feels like they're pretty much sticking with the same thing. So,
all right, I need to run, but I just wanted to note, Brian had if people haven't seen the jerseys, Brian tweeted about it. We retweeted it from the Skate Pod account, so people can check out all 4 of them.
yes.
All right. Thank you all for listening. Enjoy Bruins Leafs on Saturday. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you on Monday. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.